All right, everybody, welcome to another deep dive. And today we're really going deep on Pam Bondi.
Oh, yeah, this one is interesting.
Really is. You probably know her from the headlines, but we're going way past that today. And trying to understand, what her story is, what her actions tell us about her approach to law and politics. We've got a couple of different sources, her Wikipedia page that gives us the high level. And then we've got a much more detailed, summarized biography that we'll be digging into.
Yeah, it's fascinating because Pam Bondi's journey, it really intersects with some really major legal and political shifts that have been happening in our time. I mean, you're talking about a woman who rose up in a very male-dominated field. She
Right.
had to navigate some pretty serious controversies. And now she's being talked about as a potential U.S. Attorney General under a possible second Trump term.
Yeah, it's a wild ride, this story. So let's start at the beginning with Pam Bondi's early life. She was born in Tampa, Florida. And her dad was actually the mayor of Temple Terrace, Florida, which is a suburb of Tampa. So, talk about growing up in a political family.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder how that environment, shaped her views and really the path she took.
Yeah, it really makes you think, like, did that exposure early on plant a seed for, future ambitions?
Yeah.
So let's fast forward a bit. Bondi becomes a prosecutor in the Hillsborough County State Attorney's Office.
Mm-hmm.
And she stays in that role for 18 years.
Wow.
That's a long time.
Yeah, that's a considerable amount of experience. I mean, that really suggests a deep understanding of the legal system from like the ground up, It wasn't all high-profile cases or anything, but she handled a pretty wide range, even prosecuted Dwight Gooden,
Whoa, Dwight Gooden.
the famous baseball player for violating his probation.
I remember that case.
Yeah.
A lot of sports fans will probably remember that.
Yeah.
But, she also dealt with some very serious cases, like the Martin Anderson case, which involved the death of a teenager at a boot camp.
Yeah, that one was really tough. That case really shook Florida back in the early 2000s. It really shows the kind of weighty matters that Bondi had to deal with during her time as prosecutor.
Yeah, definitely not a job for the faint of heart. So after nearly 2 decades as a prosecutor, Bondi decides to set her sights on a bigger stage. In 2010, she runs for Florida Attorney General, and guess what?
What?
She becomes the first woman ever to hold that office in Florida.
Wow. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Not just symbolic, but it makes you wonder if that shifted how the role was perceived and approached. And it's also important to remember that this was all happening while the Tea Party movement was really gaining steam. And Bondi very much aligned herself with that conservative wave.
Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this deep dive so far, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes. So Bondi had just won this historic victory, becoming Florida's first female attorney general. So now let's dive into her time as AG, a period that was marked by some pretty major legal battles, policy decisions that really put her on the national stage.
Yeah, her time in office from 2011 to 2019, it really coincided with some really heated debates. We're talking about issues like healthcare, same-sex marriage. And Bondi, she didn't shy away from taking a stance, and she often aligned herself, with that conservative side of the spectrum.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues she tackled was the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare as some people call it. Now, Bondi, she's a vocal critic of this legislation, and she even spearheaded a lawsuit against it.
Yeah, it's interesting to analyze her opposition to it because it wasn't just about legal arguments. It was really intertwined with her conservative political ideology and particularly the Tea Party movement's strong opposition to government intervention in healthcare. Bondi seemed to really echo those sentiments, and her actions as Attorney General reflected that.
So it wasn't just, about just interpreting the law. It seems like her personal beliefs played a role, too.
Yeah, it's often a complex interplay of factors, I'd say it's likely that her legal interpretations were influenced by her political leanings and personal convictions. And that's something worth thinking about as we kind of evaluate her actions.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not always black and white, is it? It's these nuances that make these deep dives so fascinating. So another issue that generated a lot of controversy during Bondi's time as AG was same-sex marriage.
Yeah, that was another hot-button topic where Bondi took a firm stance. At the time, Florida had a constitutional amendment that banned same-sex marriage. And Bondi defended that amendment fiercely in court.
Yeah, she was very public about her opposition. Some people might even remember her leading "Lock Her Up" chants, directed at Hillary Clinton during the 2016 Republican National Convention.
Oh, yeah.
That was a pretty intense moment.
It was for sure. It's really important to understand the context here for those who maybe weren't following it as closely. This was during a really charged election, and the chant was actually related to Clinton's use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State. And it really became this rallying cry for Trump supporters. Bondi's participation in it really solidified her alignment with Trump and his base.
Yeah, it definitely highlighted those close ties between Bondi and Trump. But her stance on same-sex marriage also drew quite a bit of criticism, particularly after the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando.
Right, that horrific event really brought the debate over LGBTQ plus rights to the forefront. And Bondi faced criticism for her previous opposition to same-sex marriage, with some arguing that her rhetoric had actually contributed to a climate of intolerance.
Yeah, it led to this really heated exchange between Bondi and CNN anchor Anderson Cooper, who really pressed her on a record on LGBTQ plus rights.
Yeah, that interview really exposed the deep divisions that existed on this issue. With Bondi defending her actions, she said she was just upholding the law, while Cooper challenged her on the impact of her words and policies.
Yeah, it was a tense moment for sure. If you're finding this deep dive insightful, please leave a comment below. We really love hearing your thoughts and perspectives. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives like this one.
So we've talked about healthcare. We've talked about same-sex marriage, but there's one controversy that seems to always follow Pam Bondi around, the Trump University donation.
Oh, yeah.
We touched on it a little bit before, but it's worth unpacking this one a little bit further.
Let's do it. Remind us what happened with that whole situation.
Well, so Trump University was facing a lot of allegations of fraud and misleading business practices. People claimed they were cheated out of thousands of dollars. And Bondi's office was actually considering joining a lawsuit against Trump University, filed by the New York Attorney General.
So things were looking pretty serious for Trump University at that point.
Yeah, they were. And then a political action committee that was supporting Bondi's re-election received a $25,000 donation from the Donald J. Trump Foundation.
Wow.
And shortly after that, Bondi's office decided not to pursue the lawsuit against Trump University.
Talk about suspicious timing. It's no wonder that this whole thing sparked accusations of influence peddling.
Exactly. While Bondi and Trump denied any wrongdoing, the optics just weren't good. It raised a lot of questions about the potential conflicts of interest. That can come up when you're talking about campaign contributions and law enforcement decisions.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about Bondi's judgment and whether she was more interested in protecting her political allies than in actually upholding the law.
It's a valid concern. This incident really cast a shadow over her time as Florida Attorney General, and it's likely to come up again as her nomination for U.S. Attorney General is considered.
Yeah, it's a controversy that's hard to ignore, and it's definitely relevant to understanding how she might operate in a position of even greater power.
And speaking of her nomination, it's really important to remember that Bondi has been a staunch supporter of Donald Trump for years. She even served on his impeachment defense team during his first impeachment trial.
That's right. She was right there by his side.
Exactly. So if she does become the U.S. Attorney General, there are some legitimate concerns about whether she'll be able to maintain the independence necessary to uphold the law, even if it means going against the president's wishes.
Yeah, that's the big question mark hanging over her nomination. Can she be impartial and actually prioritize the law above political loyalty?
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
We've gone from her early days as a prosecutor all the way to her time as Florida's Attorney General. Lots to unpack there. And now in this last part, we're going to focus on what she's been up to since leaving that position back in 2019.
Yeah, it's interesting because in these post-Florida AG years, we really start to see certain patterns emerge, certain connections solidifying. And choices she made that really shed light on who Pam Bondi is, both professionally and politically.
So first things first, after stepping down as Attorney General, Bondi makes a pretty interesting career move. She goes into lobbying.
Yeah, that raised some eyebrows. She joined Ballard Partners, which is a firm known for its close ties to the Trump administration, and her work there involved representing some pretty influential clients, including the government of Qatar.
Whoa. Going from state attorney general to lobbying for a foreign government, that's a big leap. What do you think that tells us about her priorities?
Well, I think it suggests a certain comfort with navigating the corridors of power, utilizing connections, advocating for interests that might not always align with the public good. It definitely raises questions about whose interests she's really prioritizing.
Especially considering her already close relationship with Donald Trump, it's hard not to see a pattern here.
And speaking of Trump, Bondi's involvement with him, it didn't end with her lobbying work. Remember, she was also a key member of his impeachment defense team during his first impeachment trial.
Oh, right. I totally forgot about that. She was right there defending him against those charges. Yeah, that really solidified her image as a staunch Trump loyalist.
Loyalty, that's a recurring theme in their relationship. Makes you wonder, how might that loyalty play into her actions as U.S. Attorney General? Should she be confirmed? Will she be able to maintain the independence necessary to actually uphold the law, even if it means going against the president's wishes?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a question that's going to be on a lot of people's minds as her nomination moves forward.
And it's not just her past actions we need to consider, it's also her current role as the head of the legal arm of the America First Policy Institute.
Right. That's that think tank that's very much aligned with Trump's agenda, basically laying the groundwork for policies and strategies for a second Trump term.
Exactly. So if Bondi is confirmed as U.S. Attorney General, it's likely she'll be tasked with actually implementing some of these policies, and that raises concerns about whether she'll use the Justice Department to advance a partisan agenda rather than actually upholding the law in a fair and impartial manner.
It's a lot to think about. We've covered so much in this deep dive. Her early life, her time as a prosecutor, her controversial tenure as Florida Attorney General, her lobbying work, her unwavering support for Trump. It's a complex story for sure.
There's no easy answers. What we've tried to do is provide you with the information, the context, different perspectives, to help you form your own informed opinion about Pam Bondi.
Exactly. It's all about giving you the knowledge to draw your own conclusions. We always encourage you to share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. Keep the conversation going. And if you're enjoying these deep dives, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like. It really does help us out.
Before we wrap up, we wanted to take a moment to talk about Standing in the Gap podcast that we think you might find valuable. They're doing some amazing work, tackling really tough topics, and they're encouraging thoughtful discussion.
And they're running a GoFundMe campaign right now to help them reach a wider audience and to boost their production quality.
Yeah.
Things like better webcams, studio microphones, editing computers, all that stuff.
We've seen firsthand the impact they're making, and we know they can do even more with your support. So if you're feeling inspired by this deep dive and you want to help Standing in the Gap thrive, check out their GoFundMe page. You'll find the link in the show notes.
Every little bit helps, and it's all going towards creating even more engaging and impactful content. All right, well, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Pam Bondi. We hope you found it informative and insightful, and maybe even challenged some of your assumptions along the way.
Yeah, remember, knowledge is power. And the more informed we are, the better equipped we are to engage in meaningful conversations, to hold our leaders accountable, and to shape the world around us. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.